The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Just the Worst Podcast, episode number 28 to be perfectly precise. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at joeblow.com. This is Infamous, and right here at Just the Worst Podcast. And as we do week in and week out, every single show we talk about movies, sort of the overall Hollywood landscape, and try to put into perspective a lot of the things that are going on out there, especially in terms of the news. This week, though, I'm going to do something a little bit differently, and that's really because of the fact that every conversation right now is being dominated by one particular film. One of the biggest films that we've had in recent memory has arrived in theaters for this weekend, and that film would be Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Everyone's been talking about this film. Everyone's been anticipating this film. Everyone's been trying to figure out just what in the hell we were going to get from Zack Snyder here as a follow-up to the very divisive Man of Steel, with Henry Cavill reprising his role as Superman and Ben Affleck now getting under the cowl to play a new, more hardened, more grizzled veteran version of Batman. Now, if you want me to get in depth on my thoughts about the film, this is not the particular show that you want to listen to. Sorry, I'm not trying to scare you off. I'm just saying, I've already talked at length about the film itself, and you can check that out on Just the Worst Movie Review Podcast, episode number 25, where myself and the Miami Herald's Renee Rodriguez go toe-to-toe, head-to-head in talking about Batman v Superman. That's a pretty in-depth conversation, so make sure you check that one out if you subscribe to us on SoundCloud, or you can check us out on the This Is Infamous YouTube page. That show is already up there for you to listen to. You can get into it there. Also, on the This Is Infamous YouTube page, you can check out my video review of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and you can get my initial thoughts there as well. It's a little bit more surface level, not as in-depth as the podcast, but either way, you can still get my thoughts on the film in one of two ways, okay? This particular show isn't really to go any further into my thoughts on the film. What I wanted to do on this particular show was talk about the reaction to the film and the reaction to the reaction of the film, because right now there is definitely a clear divide between fans and critics, and both sides seem to be going apeshit defensively against one another, or in many ways offensively against one another. And what I really want to do is just sort of sort some of it out. I want to speak truth to power on some of it as well, clarifying some things for people who I think have a really skewed mindset of how the industry works, and also just try to figure out where some of this animosity comes from, both from fans towards critics and from some critics towards this film. Now, look, I'm not trying to undermine critics in any way, shape, or form. I am a critic myself. I review films. I know a lot of critics. I know where their heart is at much of the time in doing the job that they do. Number one, they love movies. Okay? How do I know this? Because that's their job. Their job is to watch films all the time and to relay their opinion of those films to the outside world and sort of provoke a discussion about the film. Now, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and that includes the critics who write about these films as their job. So when people look at critics and say, well, they must hate movies, no. That's not the case. You don't hate something that is your job when the only reason you really have the job is because you have a passion for the very thing at the heart of the job. No one's going out and making millions of dollars reviewing movies on a regular basis. It's not happening. I mean, there are some people who've gotten popular. There are some people who have figured out other ways around to somehow make more money, whether it's, finding a really popular podcast. Some people got TV deals. Some people get a little bit more exposure. Some people get to write some books. But nobody is living the high life because they reviewed movies. Roger Ebert was like a unicorn as far as film critics are concerned. Because you look at Roger Ebert and you go, look at Roger Ebert, though. That guy was making bank. Roger Ebert was also at it for like 40-something years. Probably longer. And Roger Ebert became a name brand. But you look at other movie critics, that's not how it works. Many movie critics, in fact, are getting paid little, sometimes even none. But they do it because they love writing about film, they love talking about film, they love expressing themselves about film. So when people say, well, the critics must just hate movies because they viewed a film in a different way than you did, is preposterous. It's ludicrous. You can like whatever movie you like or dislike whatever movie you like. But just because someone else disagrees with you or has a different opinion that is not shared by you does not somehow make them an evil, just mustache twirling movie critic who's out to smash your joy and happiness. So let's put that out there first. As far as this sudden idea, and it's not really sudden. It's been happening more and more in recent years. But this idea that critics are somehow nefariously looking to shit all over a movie. By and large. Because it's not the case. Sometimes people just go and watch a movie and they don't like it, and that's okay. And sometimes large groups of similar people go see the same thing, and they come out with the same response, which is that they didn't like it. And once again, that's okay. But for then people to sort of go out and try to undermine or undercut or reduce the importance of film critics because their opinions don't match up with either your own or what you anticipate your own will be is quite disappointing. No one, actually, let me change that. I don't want to say no one, because there are probably a handful. Very few film critics go into a movie looking to hate something. When a movie critic goes to see a film, we are giving up time out of our life to see something that we then hope will be good. Why? Because let's take Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, for example, which clocks in at a running time of about 2.5 hours. If I have to sit anywhere in one place for that length of time, I hope whatever it is that I am doing will bring some type of enjoyment to my life and make the time and energy spent worth it. Because not only do I have to watch it, I then have to take time to write about it, or podcast about it, or video review it. There's work that goes into it. Now, if you think I want to spend all that time, all those man hours, or in some cases, all those lady hours, women hours, on something that I just fucking hate, you're delusional. You really are. You have a screw loose, you need your head examined, somebody's asleep at the switch. You don't quite get it. And I get it. I understand. A conspiracy theory for you is much easier to grasp than the idea that someone doesn't share the same opinion that you do. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that's the case. I'm sorry that you have a hard time grabbing hold of the fact that your opinion isn't the be-all and end-all of opinions for the rest of the world. So let's get that out of the way first, okay? The second thing is that no one is being paid by anyone, particularly by a rival movie studio, to write negative reviews about any movie. How would that even work? Can somebody please explain to me, and I'd really love to hear the perverse logic that goes on in somebody's head who has arrived at the hypothesis that the higher-ups at Disney and Marvel Studios have been cutting checks to people this past week to write negative reviews about Batman v Superman in order to what? What do they get out of it? It doesn't really help the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It doesn't really help Captain America Civil War. Like, what is the end game? What is the benefit for the mouse spending money to disparage another film that's opening against nothing that is involved with anything that they're doing? Like, how does that help? They just get to, like, rub their hands together evilly and be like, "Whoa, people are talking bad about a movie that's not ours." That's not really how it works. Now, I will say that there are some people out there in the world, in the quote-unquote entertainment journalist side of things, and I use the term journalist very loosely, and only because that's what they call themselves, who are very easily swayed by their treatment from studios in order to give much more favorable reviews of films they've seen. Whether it's swag, whether it's access, there are plenty of people out there, and I don't mean as a majority, but there are some, and you'll know them when you see them, who are always the ones giving positive film blurbs or really high marks to films that are typically less than. Now, you could argue, well, maybe they just like all these films. Maybe they do. But when you look at their track records for what they like, which is basically everything, you will find that there's a little bit something to what it is that they're doing. But once again, that's not the norm. That's not everybody. So when people sort of paint with these broad strokes and this broad brush, these sweeping generalizations about how critics operate, they couldn't be further than the truth. In fact, they couldn't be more wrong, more incorrect. Their existence in any type of reality, it just isn't there. So as I continue to watch some of the fans' reactions to critics, it is mind-blowing to me that this is where we're at. And for what? For some type of defensive position that the movie that you probably haven't seen yet is better than what a majority of critics are saying? That's asinine. And this is coming from somebody who likes the film more than most. I am actually somebody who can find things to defend about Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. I gave the film a positive review on the podcast. I defended it. I stepped up to the plate and I said, I don't think it's that bad. It's a mess? Sure, absolutely. But it is nowhere near as horrible or horrendous or awful as some people would lead you to believe. Now, I'm not disputing the fact that some critics went and saw this film and just did not like it. They're well within their rights. That's what having an opinion is all about. They can see whatever it is that they like, or they can see whatever it is, period, and either choose to like it or dislike it. It's no skin off my back. I don't care. My problem comes more with people who are then critical of the critics, disparaging them because their opinion doesn't line up with their own. Attacking the messenger rather than engaging in the message. I mean, because that's really the point of film criticism anyway, is really just sort of provoke a discussion, to take someone's observations and provoke a discussion about a particular film in question, to maybe present someone else's perspective, somebody else's mindset, and maybe prompt you to think about a film in a way that you hadn't before. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree or disagree. I don't know why we continue to get into this bunker mentality of us versus them. Well, you're either with us or you're against us. You're either for us or you're not. You either agree or you disagree. That's the least of what film criticism is really about. I read film critics all the time who I don't necessarily see eye to eye with, or whose tastes don't necessarily align with mine. But I find them to be compelling writers. I find them to be extremely good at expressing their point of view. And it makes for an interesting and intriguing read. Something that challenges my own positions on a film, because I may not have thought of something in that way before. And it makes me go, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before. I hadn't considered that. And it challenges me as a movie lover, as a film critic, and just someone who likes to watch films. But insisting upon going after people who have a different point of view than you is just flat out, plain old stupid. You can't spend your life living in an echo chamber. It's okay to step outside the bubble every once in a while and say, let's see what somebody else is thinking about this thing. Film critics aren't your enemy. Film critics, just like you, love movies. They may be coming at it from a different way. They may be seeing it from a different perspective. And let's remember, everyone comes into a movie with their own personal baggage. But to sort of denigrate their experience because they didn't share what you have, what you felt, is idiotic. Now, I don't think you are that person who does it. But if you're thinking really hard about it and you're saying, maybe I am, then shame on you. I expect more from the listeners to this show, which is why I would assume that you wouldn't do it. But in the case that you are, come on, man. Critics aren't your enemy. Critics like you are just people who have opinions. They just happen to have an outlet to express it. And just because a large group of them come together and say, I didn't like this, so what? How does that really affect you? Did you see it and you enjoyed it? If so, what's the problem? Their opinion on a film should not invalidate or affect yours in any way, shape, or form. And if you liked it, awesome. I liked a lot of it too. And I'm not bothered by other people who didn't like it. I'm sorry they didn't like it. They saw a different movie than me. I mean, the same movie, but they saw it differently. And that's all right. I'm comfortable with my own movie tastes. To be all right with somebody else not sharing them. Not everything has to be shared. Not everybody's got to be in line with me. That's what makes us all individuals. We're all beautiful snowflakes. There's some shit. And we all like different movies. So I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally okay. And some people need to get on board with that. And understand. The critics are people too, and they have their own opinions. So just move away from that. But if that's the case, then just don't read about film. Don't read people who write about film if you can't handle it. Because you can't bash critics when they don't like something that you like, but then call upon them later when they share the same opinion on whatever. You know, if critics by and large come out in May and they go, well, I really dug Captain America Civil War, you can't be like, well, see, look how awesome the critics are because they like the same movie that I like. And I only picked Captain America Civil War because it's the next comic book film to come up, not to like launch into some Marvel DC pissing match. Could be anything. It could be, I don't know, Finding Dory. Oh, look how the critics really love Finding Dory. I like Finding Dory. Critics are alright. Could be anything. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Oh, see, the critics like Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Alright, high five, everybody. Look. Our opinion has been validated and legitimized. That's not how it works. You either ride with them or you don't. It's literally ride or die with the critics. You either ride with them through good and bad, thick and thin, or you just go, I'm not going to fucking read any of this ever. And then quit bitching about it. You know, and with that comes this idea that's now been put out there. And it gets supported by the talent, but mostly because they're trying to sell the movie. They're trying to promote the movie. But this idea that the movie was made for fans, not critics. What the fuck does that even mean? We are at a time and a place where everyone is a critic of everything. Now, I tend to believe that is not necessarily a good thing. I'm all in favor of everybody having their own opinion. Expressing it, especially through the means of the internet and social media, that's another story. One of the drawbacks to me of the internet is the idea that everyone can share their opinion. And I don't mean that in a way that, I'm trying to squash freedom of speech in any way, shape, or form, because this is the way it always has been. My problem is more than the idea that all opinions are then somehow equal because they're in the same space. Or somehow this idea that critics are detached from movies. Now look, I think that there is definitely a disconnect that exists with Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice between critics and sort of the general public. And this isn't the first time it happens. Usually it happens with these big blockbuster types of films, especially ones that are built upon brands and brands that have a loyal following. Because the fans then sort of blindly go along many of the times with the brand so as to not be ostracized from the particular fan community, so as not to, risk their brand card, to not be seen as somehow less than a fan. So I understand that there is sort of this disconnect that does exist. Sort of this gap between where the fans are and where the critics are. But at the same time, with everyone now sort of having the outlet, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever the fuck you have, this idea that movies are made for the fans and not critics just continues to feed into the perception of this divide that exists. This, once again, this us versus them mentality. Like, oh, look at those awful critics who didn't like it. It's not meant for them. It's meant for you who somehow know better. And really what that sort of says is, we believe you have quote-unquote better taste than the critics, but really that's code language for we think your standards are less than what the critics think. Now, once again, this is coming from somebody who liked Batman v Superman, but that's really what they're saying with that type of language. That's really what they're saying. is that, well, the critics didn't like it, but it wasn't meant for them, it was meant for you. Because if the critics liked it, they would have been fine with it. But they're hoping that your tastes are a little less discerning. Now, once again, if you like Batman v Superman, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I liked it. And if you didn't like it, so be it. But it's when that language is sort of used promotionally or as a defense for the film that red flags, burp, burp, should just be going off in your head. It's like if somebody says, well, it's a good movie as long as you turn your brain off. What the fuck does that mean? I mean, that's code language for, well, as long as you make sure to check your intelligence at the door, you'll be okay. I mean, who the hell turns their brain off for everything? You just drool and just piss and shit all over yourself. Oh, I'm sorry, my brain's just not working. I didn't know I was doing all that. So this idea that the movie is made for the fans, not critics. Critics are fans too, assholes. Critics watch movies because they, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, they love film. They're passionate about movies. Because guess what? Had they gone into Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and liked it, they would have been telling everybody about it. Oh, it's a great movie. Go check it out. Championing the fucking movie for you. Now, are there some movies that are critic-proof? Absolutely. There are movies all the time that are just, for one reason or another, lots of people find them to be not good. That doesn't mean that you as an audience member won't. If there's a film out there, and like here's the real bottom line. If there's a film out there that looks interesting to you, that appeals to you, that you say to yourself, I would want to go see that, then go and watch it. No critic should detract from you going to see anything that you want to see. Now, by that same token, if you do go and see it and then you come out and you didn't like something that somebody else didn't, you can't then say to them, well, why didn't you tell me? See, it's very important to realize that people are able to pick and choose whatever they want in order to create whatever narrative that they want in their own head. So they can blame critics when it's convenient, as well as praise them when it works in their favor. And it's just not cool to go that route. It's just not. And can we also talk about the Rotten Tomatoes scoring? Who gives a flying fuck what a film's Rotten Tomatoes score really truly is? What does it matter? I mean, it's no different than just being like, well, how many stars did it get? Or what kind of score did it get? Who gives a shit? If you really want to know what somebody thought about a film, go and look at their review and fucking read it. Or if it's a video review, watch it and listen. Or if it's a podcast, take a good hard listen at what they're saying. And allow the nuance, the explanation, the detail to really form a picture around how someone viewed a particular movie. But going to the fucking scoreboard, the Rotten Tomatoes scoreboard, people go, well, where's the movie at? Who cares? I think it's at like 29% right now on Rotten Tomatoes. Who gives a shit? Read what some of the people had to say. You might find that they share similar concerns about the film, or found common problems throughout their viewings. Those are the things to sort of take notice at. But somebody like, oh, well, they didn't like it. Okay, but why? Because that's much more important to know why they did not like it, as opposed to that they didn't like it. Focus on the journey they took to their conclusion, rather than putting all your weight on their fucking conclusion. Okay? Do that. Now, my other thing with Rotten Tomatoes is that you look at Rotten Tomatoes and you say, oh, it's like 29%. This is not a fucking 29% rotten movie. I mean, I tend to be a half glass full kind of guy, and I say, well, at least that then means it's better than Divergent Allegiant. A lot better, actually. But as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that really came out victorious from Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is hyperbole. Because I don't care what anybody says about the fact that they did not like Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. This film is just, it's not nearly as bad as people would lead you to believe that it is. It's not even close. Is it a mess? Absolutely. And I could see where some people could walk out and say, I didn't like it. I can understand that. But it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. I mean, I've probably seen something worse within the last few weeks. And that's sort of the other side of the coin to me in this sort of fans versus critics battle that seems to have emerged by proxy through Batman v Superman. Is that while I do not believe that there were critics who went out of their way to hate this movie, I genuinely believe that there are people who just, they didn't like it. The movie just did not do it for them. There is something a little bit off about critics. It feels like some are reveling in the fact that the movie isn't very good. Almost to the point of beating a dead horse. They want to tell everyone they possibly can before this movie was made available to the general public just how bad they found it to be. And once again, I feel like there's a lot of hyperbole on it. It feels like a pile-on is going on here for this film. That when some people early on came out and said they didn't like it, some people in the next wave just really went for it. I mean, they just really cut loose. They just really piled on. They really just said, fuck it, let's just talk about how bad this movie is. Or how bad we felt it was. And they held nothing back. They just cut loose. And they just sort of reveled in the idea of seeing how much worse they could make it sound than the previous guy. I think somebody going back to rewatch this film, and look, I would rewatch this movie. Even acknowledging the problems that Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice has, I would easily go back and watch this film again. I would much rather watch this movie a second time than I have ever wanted to watch Man of Steel again. Easily. But it just feels like there have been some who have been incredibly and unnecessarily harsh on this film than I think they would on a similar film that does not feature Batman and or Superman. Now, I want to get into a little bit of why that could be. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we all have our own baggage when we go into a film. And you can look past or forgive or ignore or get on with anything that you so choose when you're watching a movie. I mean, there are times where if you just absolutely want to forgive something that a movie does that may not jive with the rest of the film, you can just be like, it didn't really strike me, right? But I'm having such a good time with the rest of it. It's a minor detail. And there are some who cannot get past those moments. There are some that if they are not having with a good time with a movie, those things just add up. They're magnified. And it's just sort of a license to really not like something. It's like, here's a perfect example, okay? And we've all had this happen. Do you ever just not like someone? For whatever reason. It doesn't just, there doesn't have to be even a legitimate reason. You just don't like them. You don't like their presence. You don't like their aura. You just not a fan. They irritate you. They annoy you. You just don't like them being around in general. Once you sort of hit that point with them, unless there is some drastic 180 turnaround to get you to change your perception of who they are, everything that they then do from that point forward is just the fucking worst. Everything that they say is just awful. Every word that comes out of their mouth is just fucking stupid. Every observation that they make is just idiotic. Every joke that they try to make is just not funny. Just you hate every fucking ounce of their being because of where you were at prior. And I think that's sort of part of what happened with Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, is that very quickly when the movie started to not work for them, they just then fucking hated everything that came out of its face. Just everything. Lex Luthor, I fucking hate it. Superman, hate it. Lois Lane, hate it. Metropolis, Gotham City, fucking hate it. And that's sort of where we got to this idea that it's just an abysmal film. I also think that there are some people going in who started to have a negative feeling about it, for one reason or another. Now, once again, I don't think that they went in wanting to hate it, but I think some people may have gone in already starting to put it behind the 8 ball. Maybe they're not a Zack Snyder fan. Maybe they're not a fan of the way that Warner Brothers is crafting this DC cinematic universe. Maybe they're not a fan of how this model is being put together. Maybe they weren't a fan of catching Doomsday in the trailer and what he looked like. Maybe they thought there were going to be too many characters in this film, or it was just going to be too overstuffed with trying to introduce new things. There's a number of different ways. And I'm not saying I know this for a fact. I haven't talked to people about their process going in or their mindset going in. But just when you have this many people who have been so harsh to a movie, and look, once again, I'm not saying that they can't not like it. I know plenty of people who haven't, and they give reasons for it. I'm just saying I've seen similar movies come about with similar problems, as major as they can be, that have been forgiven for those problems, or those problems have been overlooked because they were a little bit more amenable to liking what was being put on screen than they have here. I just find that some of the talk about Batman v Superman has been incredibly harsh, and much harsher than this film probably deserves. And that, once again, I cannot stress this enough. This is coming from somebody who did like the film, but can absolutely understand where and why others did not. I think it's perfectly reasonable to not like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. But to hate it to the point where you just want to burn it with fucking torches? I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know about that at all. I also think part of it comes into this emotional attachment some people have toward Batman and Superman. You know, let's face it, these are two of the three most iconic comic book characters that have ever been created, with Spider-Man being the third. I mean, they are part of the mainstream. Everyone knows these characters. And as a result, everyone sort of has their own perception, their own idea of who those characters should be, how they should be portrayed, the stories that should be told involving them. And the problem is that Batman and Superman and Spider-Man mean very different things to different people. Batman especially, because Batman has been done so many different ways over his entire creation, his entire lifespan, that you can't really narrow it down to one particular kind of Batman. Superman has been tweaked as well, and there's been plenty of different versions of Superman that have been put out there as well. But you can't hold a film to only exploring one version of Superman, or only one version of Batman. You have to sort of allow them to create whatever it is that they want him to be in the world that they've made, and then see what happens. And I think that there have been people who have sort of held steadfast to their belief of what Superman or Batman is. And as a result, have closed their mind a bit to what these films could be. Now, once again, you can just watch it and say, it's just not for me. I just don't like it. And that's fine. I didn't like Man of Steel. I fucking really don't like that movie. From beginning to end, don't like any of it. But at the same time, I could look at it and say, oh, you did like it? Okay. All right. I don't agree, but I guess I can see it. And we have to stop just saying, well, this isn't that Superman, or this isn't that Batman, or Batman would never do this, or Superman would never do that. There's certain consistency, I think, that you do need to have, but you also need to allow the filmmakers and the storytellers space to put their own fingerprints on it. And it can't just be, well, this is how it's always been, even though that's not ever really the case, because these characters have been changed many times along the way. I mean, it's sad to me that there are lots of people who have come out and not like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. I'm fine with it. I wish there was a film that existed out there that people felt they could rally behind. That people saw and they said, you know what? God damn it, I love this fucking movie. I wish that movie is there. It's not this one. And it sucks that that's not the case. At the same time, I think, to me, what's most important about this situation between the fans and the critics is that we all just want to see films that are good. We all want to see films that we enjoy. We want to see films that challenge us. We want to see films that provoke thought. And we need to respect one another when it comes to other people's tastes. Just because somebody doesn't like what you like doesn't make them an idiot. It doesn't mean they don't know any better. I mean, shit. You like an Adam Sandler movie? So be it. That's what does it for you? All right. Doesn't do it for me, but if it does it for you, if that's what floats your boat, oh, more power to you. And there needs to be more of that acceptance and less judgment passing against others. And look, I've been there. I've been one of those people who are like, what do you mean like a Transformers movie? What the fuck is wrong with you? I've been there. It comes from this mentality, this mindset that your opinion is the one that is always right. But that's not the case. I think I'm just a little bit wiser in my older age. A little bit more mellowed out there. Well, I'm totally... At some point, you just got to be accepting and understanding of the fact that not everybody is going to see things the way you see it. And that's okay, as long as we all figure out something that entertains us, that brings joy to us. What does it really matter to somebody else? And on that note, I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to close out the show. So thanks for riding with me here on this particular episode. I know we pushed this one a little bit later in the week than we normally do, but I wanted to sort of wait to see how some of this shook out before I commented on this, and then once it sort of got to the point that it did, I thought this was an important topic to discuss on this particular show. So don't say fuck the fans, and don't say fuck the critics, because we really share much more ground than right now I think some of you are willing to concede. All right, I'm going to get out of here. So look, here's the deal. Let's run down all the things that you need to make sure you check out on our behalf. Hit us up on Twitter. We got a couple of different accounts that you got to make sure that you follow, starting with @JTW Podcast. That's the official Twitter handle of Just the Worst Podcast. So anytime we have a new episode that goes up, that's a good place to be notified. Once again, @JTW Podcast. Also, @TisInfamous. That's the official Twitter handle of the mothership. This is Infamous, which right now exists solely on YouTube. We're reconstructing the website as we speak. So in order for you to be notified of anything we have going up there, once again, podcasts when they go up on YouTube, or interviews, video reviews, anything of that nature, you want to follow them @TisInfamous on Twitter in order to be able to get notification of that. And you can follow me on Twitter as well, @InfamousKid, KIDD, 2 Ds at the end, for all of my rantings, ramblings, and random musings. My stream of consciousness is there for your enjoyment, so make sure you follow me there on Twitter, @InfamousKid. Over on Facebook, facebook.com/JustTheWorstPodcast, facebook.com/TisInfamous, and facebook.com/BillyTheKid. Once again, 2 Ds at the end. Work your way through all those awful Facebook algorithms, but lots of good notifications and content being posted there regularly. So try to fight through that in order to get notified of everything that we post up there. Podcast, that's where you can find on SoundCloud.com, SoundCloud.com/JustTheWorstPodcast, as well as the SoundCloud app. So if you have a mobile device, and I know you do because it's 2016, get that on your phone or on your tablet, the SoundCloud app. And once you subscribe to the Just the Worst Podcast, all of our various shows and all the episodes that go with them will be right in the palm of your hand, on your phone, on your tablet. So the SoundCloud app or SoundCloud.com/JustTheWorstPodcast. You can find all my work regularly at JoeBlow.com. This is Infamous, and right here at Just the Worst Podcast. So I want to once again thank you for riding here all the way through the show. Next week, maybe taking it off. I will be in Dallas, Texas, or heading to Dallas, Texas for WrestleMania 32. So maybe an off week. I'll keep you posted, but if you follow on the social media, you'll know for sure. So keep an eye out for that. May wind up taking a week off just for traveling purposes. But, well, in the meantime, look, this has been Just the Worst Podcast, episode number 28. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. Have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. And look, if you want to see Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, you go ahead and do that. You do you. I'll see you when we get back. I'm out for now. Peace. Just the Worst Podcast, episode number 28, has been a presentation of Just the Worst Podcast Media, and this is Infamous.